Today we're changing a fuel filter on a DW10C engine. This is the 2-liter diesel engine code RHH with 163 horses from PSA, fitted in many Peugeot and Citroen models, in this case fitted in a C5 X7. This here engine uses an element type filter, which means that the consumable of the whole process is this little filtering element, while the housing is a permanent part fitted on the block. First thing to do is to empty the stored fuel, and for this reason, and our own convenience, the manufacturer has already installed a tube running from the drain plug, so that it's easier to empty the filter of any fuel or water contamination there may be. So using a small water bottle, we can first remove the vent screw and then loosen up the drain screw. Be careful, we don't have to remove the drain screw, just loosen it up. And by doing so, the stored fuel will drain down the bottle. We're talking about half a liter of fuel, and then after draining, don't forget to tighten up the drain screw. Be very careful on tightening this, because it's plastic and it's not hard to destroy it. Next up, we can start the disassembly process, which basically consists of removing the fuel lines, the heating element connector, and the 4 screws that hold the top cap in place. Be careful of these plastic locking mechanisms. I consider them very fragile. And even though it's not shown here, it is a good practice to use plugs on the open fuel lines so that the fuel spilled out will be minimized and no contaminants will enter. Removing the top cap may take a while, cause the rubber seal is not on top but to the sides of the cap, so it takes some wiggling around in order to pull it up. The replacement process is quite straightforward. Just remove the old one and put the new one in, and don't forget to wet the rubber O-rings with fuel to lubricate them. Oh, and try not to touch the fuel with naked hands like I did here, because that remaining fuel in the housing contains fuel additive, and according to the manufacturer, it's not good for the skin. A pair of gloves is recommended. With a syringe we can empty the remaining fuel from the bucket, and then we can proceed to clean the internals. After cleaning the internals, the reassembly process can begin, first by pumping a little fuel from the tank, so that we won't have to pump later in order to vent the system. It is important to fill it up with fuel from the tank because it's fuel that contains additive. Not that if we fill it up with fuel from a bottle will harm anything, it's just recommended practice. After filling it about half full, we can put back the top cap with the filter and put the screws back in place. Now, since the sealing is done around the top cap, as I said, we can't really push the cap by hand and put it back in place. So we just put the screws and start tightening them and slowly push the cap in position. At this point, we can also connect the supply line. For the final tightening of the screws, a torque wrench is recommended, as the screws are steel and the housing threads are aluminum, and it's easy to destroy them. The torque is 11 Nm. Next step, since the supply line to the pump has been opened up, some fuel has dripped out and we need to refill that. I'm using refined diesel fuel from the gas station to fill it up. You may have heard it as clean diesel. And actually what I'm doing is venting that pipe. Then gently put back the pipe and secure it in place, and then we can go ahead and vent the filter and the system. Now, the venting procedure takes some time, as we need to monitor the air bubbles in this transparent part of the pipe and also the fuel that comes up to the vent screw hole here. We pump fuel with a hand pump until we see the fuel on the vent hole and then let it sit for a few seconds. Then repeat the process until the fuel stops falling back down. Right here, see this? That's a good view of the vent hole, and see how it stops falling in? This means that there is no more air in the filter, and now we can put back the vent screw, again being careful with the tightening. After we put back everything and secure it in place, we can continue with the venting, this time monitoring this transparent part of the line until we see no bubbles in the line. The system is set up in a way that allows us to pump fuel to the high pressure pump along with any entrained air in the system, and that fuel instantly returns to the tank through the return line right here. It doesn't get trapped inside the high pressure pump, so no problem pumping with a hand pump until we see no bubbles in the line. That means that all air is pumped to the tank and we can safely start her up and see how we're doing. And that's it, job done. One final check to make sure everything is back as it was, put back the beauty cover, and the car is ready to rock. Again, I want to recommend using a torque wrench on the screws and plugs when opening the fuel lines. Questions, comments, all free down below. Stay safe and thanks for watching. You're awesome.